everyone, welcome back to my channel. We're gonna get into a trend that has been going on recently in the YouTube beauty community. One of my friends, Morgan Turner, as you guys know, I love Sweet Morgan. She recently uploaded a video. It got me thinking, if I could only pick one palette from each brand, which one would I choose? And to be honest with you, it was a little bit tough. It really was, but I did it. It took me a few hours. I pulled them all out and I kind of narrowed them all down, and we're gonna get into that right now. So these are in no particular order. These are just what's laid out in front of me. So I'm gonna first start with Urban Decay. I have several Urban Decay palettes. I do. I have the Cherry, the Naked Reloaded, the Heat, like several of the Naked ones, twos. I have several of the Naked palettes. And I have to say the Naked Honey is definitely by far my absolute favorite. What a great palette. I don't know what they did with the formula in this palette, but it is fabulous. Like some of the best performing shadows out of all the Urban Decay palettes that I have are in this palette. And a lot of my friends who were a little skeptical as well, they all agree. They love the Naked Honey palette. It's just, there's something about the formula. This is a palette that you probably look at it and you say, I probably have all those shades in my collection, but truthfully, I don't. The thing that I like always about the Urban Decay Naked palettes is the way that they're lined up. Because of the layout, it's very easy. It's kind of that monochromatic type of palette where it's very easy to create a look with it because of the way the shades are laid out. So I love this palette. I think it's a great palette. So I have to say Naked Honey all the way for Urban Decay. So the next brand is Nars. And this was a little bit harder for me because I do have quite a few Nars palettes that I do love. But I have to say the one that I reach for the absolute most is the Skin Deep. I wish they would bring this back and make it a permanent part of their collection. This palette is like a staple. It's so beautiful and the shades are so dependable, so easy to blend. This is a great palette. I cannot say enough great things about the Skin Deep palette. These shades right here are just some of the prettiest shimmers. The thing that I like about the shimmers in this palette, they're not super shimmery. They're more of a soft shimmer. If you have mature eyes or, you know, something like that, it's a little bit softer. It doesn't emphasize the wrinkles and stuff on the eyelid and the mobile lid. This is a fabulous, fabulous palette. I wish that they would bring this back as part of their permanent collection because this is bomb. Such a good palette. The next one is from Dior. And Dior, this one was tough for me too because I do have several of these backstage palettes that I do love. In fact, I think I have all of them. I recently bought Rosewood Neutrals. So I recently picked this up on Sephora. And this is a great palette too. But if I had to pick one, this all day long. Let me just say this. The reason why I say this one is because this silver is beautiful. It blends into the eye so beautifully. It's one of the prettiest silvers I've ever seen in my life. The white shade is like a pearl ice, but in such a soft way. I love this palette. I think the shades are just fantastic. And you can see that I've used it quite a bit, and I do love this one. I have to say this one is definitely my favorite out of all of the backstage palettes. This one's definitely it. It's a good one. The next one is Miss Schwollett Tilbury, and this one is the one that I struggled with the most. You guys know that I have a love affair with Charlotte Tilbury, and I love pretty much all of her palettes. And I have several of her quads. I don't have them all, but I do have several of her quads. I have all of the larger ones, you know, like this size. Based on formula and how much you get, and the price, I have to say, I love this palette. I think this is my favorite palette from Charlotte Tilbury. This is the Easy Eye palette for Charlotte Darling look. It has a day section and a night section. But what I like about this palette is it's just kind of all condensed. These shades are just very wearable, very easy. They blend beautifully on this eyelid. You might not get as much product of each shade as you do in the quads, but I feel like you get more options. You definitely get more matte shades to kind of work with and build on. And you know, this one has 3 shimmers, 3 mattes, very easy, travel friendly. I have to say, this is definitely my favorite Charlotte Tilbury palette. The next one is Hourglass, and this one is called the Graphic Ravine palette. Okay. This is one of my favorite cool tone palettes besides the Nars Skin Deep. That's a really good cool tone palette. But the Hourglass formula is spectacular. And when I want to create, just like right now I'm wearing an all matte eye. If I want to create an all matte eye with more of a cool tone base to it, this is the palette that I will reach for, only because these shades are so easy to blend. Like, blend better than some of the shadows that I have. They're just really, really good. Matte shades for the cool tone moment is spectacular. Like, I love it. I do. I have to say, it's fabulous for mattes. The next one is Miss Natasha Denona. I don't have a lot of larger palettes from Natasha Denona, as you guys have heard me say a few times. I don't have any of the larger, like the big palettes, like the $200 and some palettes. I have bought a few of her regular bigger size palettes. I think they're like the $125, $129 palettes. I haven't always loved those, only because they have that cream to powder formula, and the cream to powder formula is hard for me to use. I know that many of you guys love it. For me, it just doesn't work for me and my technique. But I have all of her mini palettes, and I have to say, out of all of the palettes that I have in my collection from Natasha Denona, this is the palette I use the most. This is the Mini Nudes. This is a great palette. Very easy to blend, very easy to create a look with. Kind of something similar to the Charlotte Tilbury palette. Goes with a lot of different outfits. It's just your perfect nude palette that I feel like everybody needs. And this is a great palette. I can't say enough great things about the nude palette. It's definitely my favorite Natasha Denona palette. Okay, the next one is KKW Beauty. You guys know that I love KKW Beauty probably as much as I do Charlotte Tilbury. I love their products. They have some of the best products, and I know they don't get a lot of hype. It's kind of one of those brands where it's maybe a little taboo to talk about, because if you do love the brand, then all you are is a, Kim Kardashian superfan, and that's the only reason why you like the brand. I am here to tell you that has absolutely nothing to do with it. I don't really keep up with the Kardashians. I just don't. Now, I love my housewives, but the Kardashians, I don't pay attention to. Now, I have pretty much all of her palettes. The only palettes that I have not bought from the KKW Beauty line are the 2 matte palettes, like the solid matte palettes. And the reason why I didn't buy them is because I have all of her palettes. I just didn't feel like I needed that many matte shades, if that makes sense. So I just never picked them up. I love the classic palette. The classic palette has been the palette that I have raved about. This was their very first palette, and I felt like she got it right when it came to these shades. They're blendable. They're easy to blend. The shadows are creamy, but yet not too creamy. Her formula is phenomenal, you guys. It's just a great formula. I love this palette. I do. But this one is coming in hard second place for it. I have been reaching for this more and more recently. This palette is definitely coming in hard second. Like right now, these two are tied, and I'm having a hard time picking. A month ago, I would have picked a classic palette all day long. But the more I use this palette, the more I'm falling in love with it. So I would say the classic is still my favorite palette. Say that you have never bought a palette from KKW Beauty. Which one would I tell you to pick? I would say possibly this one, if this is your color story. But this Artisan Muse, fabulous. Actually, I feel like both of these palettes pair so well together that you kind of put them together and they can create a beautiful color story. And I love them both. I do. I have to say, but I would say if I had to choose one, I would probably pick the classic. I know. We're going to move on to Too Faced, and I do have several Too Faced palettes. I haven't recently bought anything from Too Faced. This was actually the last palette that I bought from them, and I love this palette. And there's one reason why I love it. Well, there's two. Number one, the formula is good. It has a good formula to it. But this peachy, I mean, come on. You guys, this is such a cute palette. So this is the Tickled Peach palette. The only thing that this palette, in my personal opinion, is missing is a true peach shade. This one is more of a pinky pink shade to it, but it's still kind of really pretty. But I love this palette. Easy to use, and it's a great palette. I do like this palette. The next one is from Anastasia Beverly Hills. So I do have several of their palettes. It's another brand that I do have several from. I would say this one is number one. I do have a second place though. The Soft Glam palette is just bomb. Like, one of the best palettes, in my personal opinion, that Anastasia ever created. It just, the color story is fabulous. The shimmers are fabulous. Everything about this palette is just amazing. And this is like a perfect, this is a perfect starter palette. So if you're just getting into makeup, I would recommend this all day long. It's just very easy to use, very easy to blend, and just a really good palette. But number 2 though was the Jackie Aina palette. You guys, that palette is really good. Very, very pigmented. And they collaborated with Jackie. I loved that Jackie created such a beautiful palette, but a lot of the shades, a lot of the matte shades would work on darker skin. It's just a great pigmented palette. Like Jackie Aina came in hard second. Like they were kind of neck and neck when I was looking at them, but because I have such a longer relationship with the Soft Glam, I had to choose the Soft Glam. But the Jackie Aina palette is so bomb. Like bomb, 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 bomb. The next brand we have is Miss Pat McGrath. And oh my gosh, I had to really give this a lot of thought because I recently have started to use the Divine Rose palette more and more, and just really have started to fall in love with that palette. I have a few of her like smaller, like 6-pan palettes. And I have some of the, you know, the 4-pan quad palettes with the special formula inside. I don't have all of the Pat McGrath Mothership palettes. I have 3, I believe. But this one is my absolute all-time favorite. I cannot get enough of this palette. The Mothership 5 palette. And the reason why I particularly like this palette over all of them, even the Divine Rose, is number 1, this rose gold right here is probably the prettiest rose gold I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't know that I have ever seen, and I love rose gold. Peaches and rose gold are my favorite. This rose gold right here is special, and it's so unique in the way that it applies. Swatching it doesn't give it justice. When you put it on the eye, it's almost like the most beautiful rose gold glitter. It's so beautiful. It's one of my favorite rose golds. And the other reason why I love this palette is I love the gold shade here. I love this beautiful olive green. I also love this shade, which is just so pretty for like a beautiful inner corner highlight or a brow bone highlight. I would say the only shade I don't use in this palette is this one right up here, because it's more of a holographic shade, and I normally don't wear a lot of holographic shades on my eye. But this entire palette is definitely my favorite from Pat McGrath. I just love it. Now, if you're new to Pat McGrath, or you've never bought from Pat McGrath, or let's just say that you bought your first Pat McGrath and you're struggling. This was my first Pat McGrath purchase, and I struggled so much when I first got this palette. And the reason is because I was trying to apply it like I do every other palette, and you can't. It is so pigmented that you have to take your time and build slowly. So you put a little bit on the brush, put a little bit on the eye, and blend it out. Go back in for a little bit more, you know, put it on the eye, blend it out. You want to kind of take your time until you get used to the pigment, because what happens is it's so pigmented. When you put it in your crease and you go to blend it out, you've got all this pigment and you have no idea what to do with it because there's so much pigment. So I recommend just take your time and build very slowly until you get used to the formula. Because in my personal opinion, I don't have any matte shades that are nearly as pigmented as Pat McGrath, but this is, in my personal opinion, Pat McGrath 5, the Mothership 5 is just perfection. It just is. It's my favorite. Okay, the next one is Marc Jacobs. I have several of these type of palettes right here, and this one has to be my number 1 favorite. In fact, I think I might be creating a look with this one. This one is called the Fantasine, the 790. What a beautiful, summery, springy, fun palette. I really like this palette. I know that on Sephora it doesn't always have the best rating, but I'm actually wanting to do maybe like a shop my stash in the near future and use this palette because I haven't used it for a while. But I have to say, this one is definitely my number 1 favorite this one's definitely my favorite from Marc Jacobs. We're gonna move on to Dose of Colors. I have several of Dose of Colors. I have to first say this. I love all their baked eyeshadow palettes. They're matte shadows, and they are blendable, and they work great, and the brush that comes with them is fabulous. One of the best brushes that come, in any of my palettes. So I have to mention that. They do have a really good formula if you're looking for like a really good matte palette. Dose of Colors, any of the baked, always good formula. But I have to say, the Friendcation palette is my favorite. I use the heck out of this when it first came out. I haven't reached for it for a while. You know how that goes. Especially if you're like me and you buy way too much makeup, sometimes some of these favorite palettes kind of get pushed to the side, but this is a great palette from A Dose of Colors. And the only shade I would say that I wish had a little bit more umph to it is this, which is called Just a Kiss. I feel like this shade is supposed to kind of give you that wet look on the eye. Like, I understand the thought behind it, but the problem is you have to apply it with your finger. And the way that the pigments are pressed, that when you apply with your finger and you're going into the shadow with your finger, it becomes hard panned. And I know that there's a different terminology for it, and I don't know what the terminology is, but it becomes hard pan and it's hard to use your finger anymore. And so I have to kind of scrape it and then go on, and that kind of makes a mess. So that would be the only shade that, meant to be applied with a finger, but using your finger also presses the pigments. So there's that. But what a great palette. Such a beautiful palette. I have to, oh, so good. The next one is from MAC. Now, full disclosure, I don't have a lot of products from MAC. I'm not somebody that has been a collector of MAC for many years. I do have several products from MAC. I do have several things from MAC, but I don't have a lot. But I have to say, if you guys were following me during the summer, you knew that I was obsessed with this palette. I don't know that you can get it anymore. I use this palette, but never on camera because I don't think you can get it. This was a Nordstrom's exclusive palette. It's discontinued. I hope they bring it back. The packaging is beautiful. I mean, look at the packaging on this palette. It's so pretty. I wish they would bring it back. This one's called the Warm Palette Eye and Face Palette. The blush and the highlighter, these shades, you guys. This was my favorite palette all summer long. It was all I used. And this palette was the palette that kind of started my love affair with cool tones. Previous to this palette, I wasn't always in love with cool tones. I never felt like they worked really good on my warmer skin. And it was just something that it didn't attract me. I was all into warm tones and that's all I wanted until I got this palette. This palette gave me an appreciation for cool tones and just how beautiful cool tones are. I love this palette. I love it. In fact, it's probably one of my top 5 favorite palettes that I've ever bought. It's fabulous and I hope they bring it back. But this rose gold, this is the prettiest shimmer rose gold. Now, the rose gold that's in the Pat McGrath palette, that's more of like a glittery type of metallic-y type of rose gold. This is just more of a shimmer rose gold. Such a great palette. And I love the blush. The blush is something similar to the Orgasm blush from Nars. It kind of gives me that vibe. It's so good. Okay, the next one is from Colourpop. And Colourpop, I haven't bought from Colourpop for a while because I kind of just got overwhelmed with Colourpop. I don't know if you guys are like me, but they launch so much stuff so often that I just had to take a Colourpop break. And I have to say, my all-time favorite palette from Colourpop is the Brown Sugar palette. I don't know if you can get this palette anymore, but it's kind of just a very easy, neutral palette, very affordable, and just amazing. Like this shade right here, Saint, I have nothing like it in my collection. Nothing. Out of all of the big brands that I have, all of the expensive brands that I have nothing like this shade. It's hard to even describe it. It's got greens and browns and blues. I don't have anything like it. It's so, oh, you guys, it's so pretty. Like I said, I don't know if this palette is still available on the Colourpop website, but Brown Sugar was in collaboration with Korichi. One of the best Colourpop palettes ever. And even all of these matte shades, they blend beautifully, like better than some of their other palettes. I also really do like their Sweet Talk palette, and I kind of was struggling to decide, but because this one has the glitter, I don't like the glitter, the pressed glitter from Colourpop. I don't like it. I do not like that pressed glitter. Woo! Ooh, I don't like it on my fingers. I don't like it on my eyes. I don't like it. So I definitely had to pick this one. Then we have Dominique Cosmetics, and I have all of the Dominique Cosmetics palettes, but I have to say the first one is my favorite. The Latte palette is beautiful. All of the matte shades in here, the shimmer shades, they blend so beautifully on the eye. And I don't feel like this palette gets any credit. It's so good. Her matte formula is fabulous. It blends so good, and it's kind of a very soft type of formula. So like a creamy to powder formula, if you will, kind of something similar to the Natasha Denona. But for me, it blends much easier. It's so soft, but blends it's like butter. It's so, great formula. But the shimmers are incredible. I recommend this for anybody who loves a just bright shimmer that just is stunning on the eye. Such a great palette. The only shades I don't use are these two. Personally, I don't know. I just don't like these two. I love purples. I don't always love blues, but these two shades, like the actual shades themselves, not my favorite, but the rest of the palette is so good. The next one is my absolute favorite peachy palette. You guys know I have a love affair with peach. It definitely works great with my skin tone, and there's just something about the color, that light, that peachy colors that just warms my soul. This is from Kylie Cosmetics, and let me say this, I don't buy a lot of Kylie Cosmetics. I would say I roughly have maybe 5 or 6 palettes from her brand, but this is my favorite peachy palette. And this is called I guess this is the Kylie Jenner palette. I don't know. It just says Kylie Jenner press palette. I don't know. This palette is fabulous. If any of you love a peach palette, this is the dream. The thing that I love most about this palette is that they got the tones right when it comes to peach. A lot of brands don't. A lot of brands will throw out a palette and it'll have a lot of pinks in it and a lot of pink peach or whatever, but this one is like true peach. This is what you want to say is a true peach. You have different colors of peach all in one palette, and it's fabulous. Now, the thing that I will say that I love most about it is the matte shades, because it's really rare that you find a palette that is a true peach palette that has all these different arrays of colors for peachy tones. And that's what I love most about it, because you can make it a darker peach look, you can make it a light flush of peach, you can kind of mix and match and kind of do what you want with it. Such a great peach palette. Now, let me say this. The Kylie Cosmetics brand is more for like teenagers and, you know, women in their early 20s. Like my daughter, 17, loves Kylie Cosmetics. That's who Kylie appeals to, is that real young, you know, millennial generation, if you will. For me personally, I think that's why I gravitate towards the KKW Beauty brand, because I feel like it's a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more mature, if you will. I don't have nearly as much from Kylie Cosmetics as I do from KKW Beauty just because of that. I feel that the KKW Beauty brand is just much more sophisticated and much more classy, but this is a great peach palette. If you guys are looking for a fabulous all peach, so good. So that's it. Those are my picks. Those are my picks from if I could only pick one palette from each brand. This is it. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. If you guys are interested in the makeup look that I'm wearing, I will be uploading it later on today on my Instagram. I've been doing those 1-minute makeup tutorials on Instagram, and I've really enjoyed doing them. You guys seem to really love them. So I will link my Instagram in the description box down below and right here also on the bottom of the screen in case you guys have not, you know, seen the last few videos that I've uploaded. They've been so much fun, and this is a solid matte eye look that I wanted to do. So definitely check out my Instagram for this makeup look. I hope you guys all have a wonderful week and you stay healthy and safe. I will see you guys all in my next video, and I love you all so much. Bye.